Look at that growth that we're getting on these sweet potatoes already. The slips are coming. But we did this in a slightly different manner than we normally do, and we're going to tell you how. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of an extended experiment. So why am I, again, sitting in front of a tank full of guppies and also platies? The red ones are platies. These are live bearing fish, which are relatively inexpensive to find. And as you can see from all the babies in there, they are very easy to breed and propagate. But what does this really have to do with homesteading? Well, the first part of this actually has very little to do with the fish, other than the fact that I'm using the fish tank. We're not new to growing sweet potatoes. We've grown them for several years now. In 2021, we added 2 new varieties as sort of a trial. But of course, one of the pieces of growing sweet potatoes is you need to propagate the stems so that you can clone them, right? And there are different ways to do this, but typically what we would do is start them in water. And because they like heat, we would put them behind the wood stove. But we had another idea. Well, what if we could propagate our sweet potatoes using a very small aquaponics system? And that's basically exactly what we're about to do. So this system's already been functioning for a bit of time, as you can see again from all the young guppies. And it just uses a sponge filter. So there's nitrifying bacteria in there already. It's not a super mature system, but it's mature enough. So we're going to give it a try. Above the aquarium, we've built basically a cowled in area that, as I open it here, actually has some grow lights. Looking down at the fish, you can see the lights reflecting there. So what we are doing is going to do kind of like a deep water starting for these sweet potatoes. We bought these, I think these are from the dollar store, these little pots that hang on, or thingies that hang on the back of a deck actually. We've just kind of retrofitted them. Put the pots in so we'll be able to have a constant depth of water so the sweet potato will constantly be submerged. It's warm because this is set to about 24 degrees Celsius. We have a sponge filter in the bottom, which I'll show you in a second. So there's water movement, which is good for the roots. And if you look in the bottom, although there's a glare, these pots will allow the roots to grow down through them, but at the same time, for the most part, protecting them from the fish. So we are going to go and get some of our tubers and place them in here and see what happens. So here are our sweet potatoes coming out of storage. We had kept them in the grow room. You can basically see, without even really getting in there too much, the vast majority of them look to be in really good shape. We've kept more than we need for starting new sweet potato vines. But that's okay, because what we don't use is going to be eaten. Putting them aside for a little while to get a few good ones isn't necessarily a bad idea. We have everything in place. Basically all we've done, and you can see the water in there, we've put them in. There's lots of light, should stay very warm. We should get fairly nice robust shoots coming off these. So this was one of our purple varieties. This was obviously our big orange flesh variety. And then this was a second purple variety, and then we have one extra orange fleshed one in there for good measure, just to keep everything in place. And obviously we can tell the difference when they start to come up. So now we wait. So one thing about this setup, we put them in the pots to sort of provide a little bit of protection. Not so much from the guppies and the platies, but from these guys, which are bushy-nosed plecostomus, that their function in this little mini ecosystem is algae eating. But they will eat plants given the opportunity. So we'll see how that goes. The pot should provide some protection. Of course, the nice part about this system is we have the bright lights. They're grow lights, full spectrum, which not only make the fish look very pretty, but that does grow algae, which all of these fish do eat to some degree. And it grows aquatic plants well, so we should get some really good sprouts coming off these sweet potatoes. So this is only 2 days after we put these in here, and there's not a lot going on with all of them. When I come over here and I look down in there, you look at the roots that have already started to grow on this longer purple variety. They're pretty impressive, and I actually think I can see some on the orange variety. That's pretty fast. Now, they were sprouting a little bit, but those root hairs, or not hairs, those roots were not there. It has now been, I think this is 3 days since we last looked at these sweet potatoes. And as you can see, there's a lot of root growth coming. You can kind of see, sort of see in there, that there's roots starting to poke out. So this is encouraging. And here we are above. This one sweet potato definitely has some sprouts coming, which is fantastic, but it's starting to look like most of the varieties are just starting to get some. Now, one thing, because this is heated water, I do need to top it up a little bit to keep the bottoms of the sweet potatoes well submerged, so I'm going to go ahead and do that here shortly. But when I come back in a little closer on the roots here, one thing that I have noticed is the guppies and the platies don't pick at them, or don't seem to pick at them, which is encouraging, because in a deep water culture system like this, a lot of the times they don't include fish directly with the plants. But if these fish essentially can be trusted enough, this will be the experiment, to not devour the roots, that could be useful on a small scale. So we are now 3 days later, and we're kind of doing a check here. Now, this variety of purple sweet potato, it is growing roots, but it seems to be really slow, and we may actually pull this out here momentarily and take a bit closer look at them. But they're not taking off as quickly as we would like. It's a little hard to see, but these orange sweet potatoes, they are growing. This batch hasn't sprouted any slips yet, but they're starting to grow some pretty impressive roots themselves, so I think it's just a matter of time. This group is growing like mad. These are another variety, except for the one in the middle. This is another variety of purple sweet potato, and they literally, it's twice a day we come and check these when we turn on and off the lights for the aquarium, and you can see the growth coming. But the number of slips we're going to get off of this particular variety is going to be impressive, very impressive. And you can see in there the root mass that's coming is super impressive. And this is the view from below the water line. You can see that one pot is just teeming with roots coming through. It's absolutely amazing. This almost is like you can watch it grow. It's growing that fast. And if you look over here, you will see that, as I promised from the top view, these orange sweet potatoes are starting to take. So definitely looking forward to tracking the progress here. Even these sweet potatoes over here, the purple variety that really hasn't grown super fast, still has some growth. That's what we want to see. One thing that's really interesting about this particular approach, and this is something we're hoping to scale up to a degree, is these fish don't really pick much at the roots. They more or less use it for cover, but we really haven't seen any of them chewing on them or any of that sort of stuff. They leave them alone, which is really important because a lot of aquaponics systems have the fish separate because the fish will decimate the plants. It's kind of like your outdoor livestock. So this is a really interesting experiment in that guppies and platies seem to be tank mates which play really nice with at least sweet potatoes. It's definitely working. And of course the next step is we're going to let these slips grow a bit. There's actually a couple in there we could probably harvest already to get them rooting. We now have to make the decision. Do we try to root them in the same aquarium water where it's nice and warm, or do we do it elsewhere? But it's very simple. We'll just be sort of pulling some of those off. And the nice part about having this under the lights is the slips are staying quite compact, which I think will be helpful, because we've had in the past when we've done it behind the wood stove that the slips have gotten quite long and leggy before we actually get around to taking them off. So upon a little bit of closer inspection, we did actually have one sweet potato essentially go bad on us. And that would be one thing when you're doing this kind of method, is you would want to be careful. And even though we've been checking it sort of twice a day, we didn't check it quite enough. And you wouldn't want one of these to actually disintegrate to that point of fouling the water too much because, well, that could kill your fish, to put it very bluntly. So we're going to do a little bit of a more thorough check on some of the ones that haven't really done much of anything. Just something to keep in mind as a lesson with this, because, I mean, it does happen even when you're starting them in the normal method. Well, like any good experiment, occasionally we make little mistakes. And one of the big mistakes here was we didn't, and we knew this, but we didn't actually think about how important the aeration is. Now, this is a fairly large tank. It's a 45-gallon aquarium. That's US gallons. So it's got quite a water volume, and there is quite a bit of water movement in this tank. However, this filter and air stone that runs this filter was really important to the formation of these roots, because this pot was located directly above the airstream. Upon further investigation, we have discovered a few other sweet potatoes that were starting to kind of get to that point where they were going to rot. What we need to do, and this is probably a very important lesson here, is we only have 3 pots in this tank. We need to basically daily move these around, because for us right now we only have the 1 air stone. Or in the future, add a second filter with a second air stone, which realistically wouldn't be a terrible idea. The fish and the plants would probably be a lot happier with that. It's something to think about for the future, I suppose. But still, that right there is pretty good proof of concept that this can work. Well, this is definitely an experiment that has worked extremely well, and we're very pleased with the results so far. But as I said, we need to get into stage 2 and actually start some of the slips. Kind of in closing, this is definitely something to consider. It's a lot of people have aquariums. A lot of people keep tropical aquarium fish. It doesn't take a lot of planning and a lot of change to your setup to figure out ways to basically put your aquarium fish to work growing you food, as we've just seen from our sweet potato experiment. Stay tuned for our adventures in raising sweet potatoes in 2022.